Okay, so let's switch to different subjects. So first, I'd really like to thank again the organizer of the workshop and also the organizer of the tutorial for putting up such a nice tutorial. So this is going to be the last talk in this tutorial, and I'm going to talk about slightly different topic than what you saw throughout this week. I'm going to talk about interactive communication in networks. Okay, so this entire week we talked about the two-party case. So I guess I need not explain it again. We have Alice and Bob, that each one has some input and they want to interact to compute some function. That's what we were doing this entire week. This talk, I want to talk about the multi-party case. Now, instead of having Alice and Bob, we have Charlie and who? Diego. Good. So we have many people, let's say 3 for just for an example. They are connected to each other. Each one has this input, and they want to compute some function of their joint input. Okay, so although I draw it that way, I don't want you to think that they must be all connected to each other. We may have any arbitrary topology. So we can formulate it as a graph of n nodes. Each node will be a party, and each edge will be a communication link, unidirectional. So if P1 and P2 are connected, both can send and receive bits with each other, but P2 cannot send bits to P4. Okay, and again, each one gets his own input, and they want to compute some function of their joint inputs. So that's the multi-party interactive communication. The thing is that we have plenty of modeling issues here. So let me just tell you about some of them. So how do these parties perform the computation? They perform it using some protocol. You can call it Pi. And the protocol can be synchronous. In this case, we have rounds. We have time notion. And at every round, each party sends a bit on each of his communication channels. Okay? But there is also the asynchronous model where there is no notion of time. And then whenever you receive a message, you can send message to all your neighbors. But you don't have to send message. You can keep silent.
In the asynchronous model, do you still have a notion of rounds?
No, because there is no time. Okay, so that was the multi-party interactive communication. Now let's talk about noisy multi-party interactive communication. So now the communication channel may be noisy. And again, we have some modeling choices. How do we model noise? So as you already saw by now, we can assume that the noise is stochastic. So this is the random noise. Or for instance, each communication channel is a BSC with a probability of flipping the bits epsilon. It could be adversarial noise, where we have only a global amount of bit flips. This is the Hamming model. We can also have something in between. For instance, we can restrict the noise per link. We can assume that each link suffers from some epsilon fraction of bit flips. Okay? So there's plenty of field to talk about. And let me state what we what do we want to achieve. So the goal in coding, as before, is the following. Assume that we have some protocol that works if there is no noise. What we want to do, we want to construct a new protocol that is resilient to noise. And as before, we want to discuss the main parameter we discuss should be the rate. How much redundancy we add by making the protocol noise resilient. And the rate is just the communication of the old one divided by the communication of the new one, just as in the two-party setting. So our goal, what we would like to have with this new resilient protocol, we would like to have, first of all, we would like to make this noise resilient protocol succeed, either with probability 1 or with high probability, for instance, if the noise is random. And we also want the rate to be high, or at least not vanishing, not 0. So I will say that the rate is not vanishing if when we assume that the number of parties goes to infinity and the length of the original protocol may go also to infinity, then we want the rate to be non-zero, strictly positive. I will sometimes call it constant rate, but when I say constant, I mean positive constant. So it's positive rate. Okay, so let me survey some of the results. And let me begin with the case of random noise. There are two schemes. I will actually spend most of my time explaining what these two schemes do. The first one is by Rajagopal and Shulman from the 90s. It assumes a synchronous model and random noise. It works for any topology. And assume that the maximal degree of the graph is d, then it gives us rate of 1 over log d. Another result by Alon Braverman, Evremenko, myself, and Hopler. We don't work, this scheme doesn't work for any topology, only for d-regular graph. And assuming that the mixing time is m, it gives rate that goes like 1 over m cubed log m. I will give more details about these two in a minute. But before going there, let me just, okay, before that, sorry. So I said we want the rate to be non-vanishing, or to be positive. These two code schemes imply coding with positive rate for many topologies, but not to all of them. For instance, we can get, each time that d is constant, this coding scheme will get us a positive rate coding scheme, for instance, for the case of a line, a cycle, or any constant degree graph. However, here we will get constant rate when the mixing time is constant. So this will give us a positive rate coding for instance, for complete graphs or random graphs with degree n to the alpha for any positive alpha, etc. Okay, so few words about the case of adversarial noise. As you can see, all these results are from the last 3, 4, 5 months. So the first two work in the asynchronous model. Here, this result assumes we have a star, or at least it assumes that the graph has a subgraph, which is a star. It resists 1 over n, up to a constant 1 over n fraction of noise, and they actually show that you cannot resist more than 1 over n noise. This is kind of trivial, because with 1 over n fraction of noise, you can just pick one of the parties and completely corrupt that party. So 1 over n is the maximal noise that multi-party schemes can suffer. And they get positive rate for their model. This result in the middle, they also use the asynchronous model. They assume a complete graph and they get the same parameters. I will not get to the difference between these two, mainly because it's really a new result and I'm still not understanding it well enough. And another work by Hose and Shulman, and this work works in the synchronous model and adversarial noise. It works for any topology. It achieves the maximal possible noise rate. However, the rate is n over m log n, where m is the number of edges. So this doesn't give constant rate for all topologies, but for some of them it does.
For any topology?
Sorry. Yes. Right. Okay, so as I said, I'm going now to talk about these two. So let's just fix the model, because I told you about too many models and I don't want you to be too confused. So what I'm going to talk about in this talk. So we're going to assume the synchronous model. Again, we have a notion of time, we have rounds, and at every round, every party sends a bit on every channel that it is connected to. So P1 can send bit to P2, to P3, and to P4. These bits can be different. It doesn't need to send the same bit to all of them. We will assume random noise. So each communication channel here is a BSC with a flipping probability epsilon. And again, the goal is, if somebody gives us a protocol that works when there is no noise, we want to compile it into a noise-resilient protocol that succeeds with high probability and has high rate. Great. So let me begin with Rajagopal and Schulman coding scheme, the RS-94. Just state it again. So given a network G with maximal degree D, so each party is connected to at most D neighbors, and given a protocol pi that takes T rounds when there is no noise, error-free, we can find a noise-resilient pi prime that works over BSC channels and takes order of T log D plus 1 rounds and succeeds with high probability. Let me give you some details about how this works. So the first idea is the following. We know how to do two-party interactive computation. We had spent the week on doing this. So in multi-party, still each two parties can communicate by themselves and make some two-party interactive communication. So basically that's what the parties do. Every two parties will just run some variant of a two-party interactive scheme for some order of T rounds. Let's just set it to CT rounds. But it will not be the same scheme that Anoop was telling us about, that they send edges. It will be slightly more simple scheme that when I want to tell you the path, I just tell you the path. If my first edge is the left one, I'll just send 0. If the next one is the right one, I'll send you 1. So I go along a path. And if I realize that I sent you the wrong data and I actually sent you the wrong path, I can always send you back. And back just means that I take my path one step back. I backtrack my path. Okay, and this is sent using tree code and using all the machinery that Anoop was talking about. So how does this scheme work? This scheme works. Each party receives messages from all his neighbors. He decodes what he got. He plots the path that he believes that the neighbor was trying to say. And then he looks at what he got, and he says, okay, do I know what my next step in the path? If I know what my next step, I will just send it. If I don't know, I just backtrack. Let me just give you an example. It will make it more clear. So let's assume these are the first 6 rounds. And I have 3 neighbors, P1, P2, and P3. Let's assume this is, so I got some symbols from P1. They are encoded using this tree code. I decode it, and I get this, that this was what P1 sent to me. Maybe this is not what he sent to me, but that's what the tree code tells me that he sent to me. Maybe at the next round, I will believe that he sent to me totally different things. That's the property of a tree code. But so far, this is what I believe he sent to me. And this is what I got from P2, and this is what I got from P3. Okay, so the first thing that I do, I parse what they say. I parse all these backtracks. So P1 said 1, 0, 1, 0, and then he backtracked. So I removed this 0, and then he said 0. So that's what he said. That's what I believe he said. P2 didn't say back, so this is what I believe he said. And P3 was saying a lot of backtracks, so he actually said only 0, 0. All the rest was deleted. So my point of view is that my neighbor said that stuff. Okay, but remember that until now, it's round 6. I already said some stuff. Some of the stuff that I said is correct, some of it is incorrect. So for instance, let's assume that I send these messages. Now I can look at what I believe they said and about what they said and check if it makes sense. So for instance, look at all this stuff. This information that I already sent doesn't make sense because I don't even know what P3 says here. So how could I could not guess the future and say something that I don't know. So these things are probably incorrect. But I also check that these are also correct. And then if everything is correct, I will just send the next thing. But if things are inconsistent, like we see here, definitely these 3 are inconsistent, I will just tell all my all my neighbors, listen, I got this wrong, let's backtrack. So I will send back, and my neighbors will just remove this one. Yes.
I'm confused about, so in this, how does a player interpret the parsed list? Like, how do you know which edges the bits correspond to? Because of the timing changed, right?
Because, okay, so every back just removes the last undeleted bit.
Right, but what edge does that bit correspond to? Because you don't know which round that bit.
No, that's definitely. So it always gives you. So this is the parse. Do you get how we get from here to here?
No, from the second thing, from the parsed list.
From here to. But this, okay, yeah. But once we have parsed, we assume that these are the correct path in order. So this would be. I assume that this would be the first edge. This would be the second edge. This would be the third edge. Maybe I thought.
Only two edges now. The third edge.
Right. So these are totally wrong because they don't know the third edge. Maybe previously I thought that they knew, but then it was deleted, right? So this changes at every round.
So I have another confusing thing. If you're backtracking on one of them, shouldn't you be backtracking on all the others? Because your state depends on all the messages. Right.
Exactly.
You cannot handle them independently.
This is correct. So when you continue with all of them. When you backtrack, you send backtrack to all of your neighbors. But when you get backtrack, you don't get backtrack from all of your neighbors because they might be unsynchronized.
Okay. And so in this case, for example, even that second message or third, and I don't know which one, but that you would have to delete one of them too, right?
This one.
Yeah,
so, well, this depends. If this I already sent. If this one is the correct one to send, assuming the two rounds, so these the two edges, and this is my third edges. If my third edge is correct, dependent on the two previous edges, then I will not delete it. If it's incorrect, I will delete it and send something else. Okay, so now let's do some analysis. So very vaguely, we can see that each error may cause us to backtrack and delay the simulation. And we need to make sure that we don't delay the simulation too much, otherwise we will not be able to complete it in order of T rounds. So actually, if we just think about the most simple analysis, we will realize that there are too many errors. Like the error is proportional to the amount of edges. And this is too many. But the key idea of the analysis is that some errors add up, while other errors don't add up. So some errors will, if two errors happen, some of them will cause two times time unit of delay, but some two errors will just cause one unit of delay. And when errors add up, they add up if they are in the influence cone of each other. What is the influence cone? So if some error happened, in the next step it affects D parties, right? All the D parties that connected to the party that had an error. In the next round, it will affect the D neighbors and the D neighbors of the D neighbors, and so on. This will be the influence cone. It's like how the information propagates. Okay, so to understand a little bit why some errors add up and some not, let's have an example. So assume that all parties, there is one round that all parties get an error, all of them at the same time. Now let's assume that on the next round, the tree code saves us, and all of them realize that they had an error, and all of them back up. So we lost one round of delay. Everybody backtracked, so we lost only one round, although n errors happened, because these errors didn't add up, because they are not in the influence cone of each other. They are aside. Okay, so maybe to visualize this, I took this picture from the original paper. You can see, so what we have here, we have a simple line where each party is connected to the processors next to it. So these will be the processors, and each one is connected to one to the left and one party to the right. And this will be the time. So let's assume this X is an error, and the black squares are just the backtracking. So if this guy had an error, then he realizes and he backtracks and he sends backtrack to his neighbors. And you can see that the influence cone here, it causes a wave of backtracking. When do errors add up? So if we had an error here and then we backed up, and then in the influence cone we had another error, we need to back up again. This is already 2 levels of delay. So actually the amount of time we back up is if we look at the influence cone of one party and we can look at all the lines, the amount of errors along this line in the influence will determine how many times we backtrack. And we just need to make sure that we don't backtrack too many times. Okay, so the theorem by RS is that if simulation failed, it must have been the case that at least that many errors happened, and this happened on a line that add up. So this many errors that add up must have happened. Okay? So what is the probability that simulation fails? Let's just count how many lines, how many such lines we have, and then realize what is the probability to have the event that too many errors happened across one line. So we have n parties. This is just the history cone. So one party is connected to D on the first round. Those D are connected to this square. I mean, each step it increases by multiplying by D. So this is just the history, just the influence cone. These are the amount of ways to have these many rounds, these many errors within CT rounds, right? And this is the probability per error the probability to have CT over 4 errors, right? If each error happens with probability P error. And in order to get this probability, this event to have small probability, we just need the probability of error, of a single error, to be slow, to be very small. We just need PE to be less than poly over 1 over D, right? And this is what gives us the rate of log D in this scheme. Because in order to make the single error so small, we need to send each bit something like log D times. Right? So we send each bit log D times, and we have CT rounds, and this is what gives us the rate. Questions on the RS scheme?
N doesn't come into this calculation.
Yeah, so we assume that T is way larger than N. So all of these are to the power of T, and it gives us a log N there. But T is way larger than log of N.
But if that's the case, then the D plus 1 to the CT is also at most N, right? Because your cone can never be larger than N.
Right. Yes.
So
Yes, but this will give these two things will give 2 to the power of T up to a constant. So
One can be larger than N.
Can be larger than N?
Yeah. I mean, like a message. So in the uncorrupted case, a message can go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, right?
You're not counting this, the part.
oh, sorry, the cone can be, but I mean at some point this will become N, right? It will become that any step you just multiply by N. Right? It doesn't increase. Okay, so how am I with the time? Oh, good. So that's the RS-94. Let me summarize. So it gives it can compile any protocol to a noise resilient that works with high probability over BSC. That's how many rounds it takes. So when do we get a constant rate? We get constant rate whenever D is a constant, right? However, in the worst case, for instance, when we have a complete graph, then D equals N, and we get a rate which goes to 0, 1 over log N. Yeah, so another thing, this scheme is not efficient because it assumes the machinery of 3 codes. However, it can be made efficient using the machinery of potent 3 codes. I think there was a question about it a couple of days ago. So in case of random noise, we know how to make 3 codes that can be constructed and decoded in efficient time. This is joint work with Ankur Moitra and Amit Sahai. Okay, so now let's move to the other protocol that I promised to talk about. I will call it the A+ coding scheme. A+ stands for the A, B, E, G, A. So it's Alon, Breverman, Efremenko, myself, and Heupler. We're still missing C, D, and F, so we take applications to get it straight. Okay, so let me just dive into the theorem. Assume that our topology is a deregular graph, and assume that it has mixing time m. I will say in a second what mixing time means if you don't know. Then there exists an efficient coding scheme with rate 1 over m cubed log m and high success probability. And mixing time just means that if you start at some node and take a random walk of m steps, you will end up more or less everywhere with the same probability. You will end at every node with probability almost 1 over n. That's what we want. So we get constant rate. Okay, so m is constant for many graphs. For instance, for the complete graphs where RS94 doesn't get good rate, we will get a positive constant rate. Or for random, yeah.
I'm careful about the definition of mixing. That makes sense if the graph is regular. In general, your limit distribution is proportional to your degree. So this definition is a little bit...
Right, but we assume a regular graph. The regular graph,
we are dealing with regular.
only the regular graph, yes.
If it's not irregular, then we pretty much know that it's not true.
Yeah.
What is not true?
No, in the case, it will not work if we are not in the regular topology.
It has to be exactly deregular. There can be.
It can be not exactly.
It can be.
But you cannot have like one node with degree n and all the other nodes with degree 1.
It cannot be a star.
That's another way to say it, yes.
What happens for the line? Can you say something that's not?
So for the line, the RS94 already gives us a coding scheme with good rate. So, but no, this scheme will not give good result there. And I'll tell you why. So, okay, so how do we prove this theorem? Our starting point is actually looking at what I told you about RS94. And let me just restate the theorem that I told you then. So I'm saying that you can also imply the following. So if a single round of the noiseless protocol can be simulated using, let's say, k noisy round with good probability, 1 minus PE, where we want to have PE negligible in n, let's say, then any T-round protocol in T-round noiseless protocol can be simulated using order of KT noisy rounds with very high probability. So what I showed you in Schulman, we just were bounding the probability of single error. So obviously, if we bound the probability that all parties at one round succeed to transmit their bit, we are in a better shape. And then what I showed you, PE needed to be less than 1 over poly D. So obviously, if it's negligible in n, we are only in a better shape. So this is a corollary of what I told you. But what it means that we only need to show how to simulate a single round of the noiseless protocol in order to be done. What's a single round? Every party has 1 bit to send to each of his neighbors. If we show how to deliver this bit reliably with k steps, we will be done and incur a blow-up of k. So if I show you how to do it with constant number of steps.
I find how to understand. The probability is even improving with time?
Yes. Yes. So this actually, yes. Yes, because as the protocol is longer, you transmit more and more information. So think about transmitting 1 bit. If you just transmit 1 bit, it will fail with probability epsilon. But if you transmit it n times, it will fail with, you will be able to decode it correctly with probability epsilon to the n over 2.
Protocol will work unless there's an unusual error pattern, right? If the protocol is very long, the probability that there's an unusual error pattern will decrease exponentially in the length of the protocol.
Like Shannon.
Okay, so yeah, so let me give you a couple of ideas that we use. And just to plot these ideas, let's assume that we have a complete graph. Okay, so assume we have a complete graph, and I have 2 nodes, S and T, source and target, and S wants to send n bit to T reliably in constant number of rounds. So obviously, you cannot send the bits directly because this will take n rounds. It's too much. But what S can do, he can do the following. He can take these n bits, just encode them using standard error correcting code. This will give him like order of n bits. And now we know that even if each bit of this order of n bits is being flipped with some probability epsilon, then still it can be decoded with high probability. Then the next thing is just to use the network to relay this information. So instead of sending all these bits directly, we will send a small chunk to the first node, small chunk to the second node, and in the next step, they will also relay the information back to P2. So in 2 rounds, we were able to communicate n bits between S and T, and we did it reliably. So P2 will be able to, so T will be able to decode it with high probability. The second observation is that if we did this thing on a complete graph, then we only used n edges of this graph, right? Which is a very small fraction of the graph. The graph actually has n square links in a complete graph. Well, this implies that not only that S can talk with T, but also other parties can talk with each other because they don't collide. There's just too many paths that can be used simultaneously. And this already gives a solution to the complete graph, which I will not give the details on, but it's based on just splitting the network into subsets of square root of n and relying through these subsets using some routing scheme. I will give slightly more information about this, but I want to focus on the deregular case, not on the complete graph. But they are related, so it will make sense. So okay, so let me just explain what I didn't say in the last time. So when S wants to talk to T, what he can do, he will just pick a subset of, let's say, square root of n parties, and will just relay the information through these parties. And not only this, but while S talks with T, also this node can use these parties to relay information to someone else, back to S, for instance, right? Because these are totally different paths. And not only, also these 3 nodes can still relay information at the same time that these 3 nodes relay information. So we have a lot of ways to shift information from side to side, and this allows us to complete, to let everybody talk with everybody as we need. So this happens on a complete graph. Can we take this idea to the deregular graph? So in the deregular graph, it's not as simple as it looks here, because here I can just pick 3 nodes. They are good relaying network. They are connected to everybody. What happens in a deregular graph? So this is a deregular graph. And let's say that S wants to talk with his neighbor T. Now, it makes less sense to pick this guy to relay through, because S is connected to this guy, but this guy is not connected to T. Another observation is that there are still many, many paths between S and T using this relay. And here we need the mixing time. So we actually show that there are many short paths. There are many paths of length at most 2m that connects S and T. We'll give more details about it in a second. This joint path, right? But this is actually the property we need. We don't really need the mixing time. We need to have a lot of disjoint short paths between S and T. Why do we need them to be short? Because S is going to communicate message through this path. So if this path is long, it will just incur more blow-up. But this will incur blow-up of like 2m, which is great if m is constant. Okay, so now I'm going to do two things. First, I'm going to steal 5 minutes from the from the coffee break, so don't hate me that much. And second, I'm going to just give you how this coding scheme works in 3 simple steps. Okay, so the first step is the following. We claim that if you give me a list of source and targets, it can be with any multiplicity, but you ensure me that each node doesn't appear too many times in this list. So each node may appear in this list only d over m times. Then we show that we can connect each Si with its Ti using a path of length 2m, and moreover, all these paths are jointly edge disjoint, so they don't interfere with each other. This is based on so we use Lovász local lemma to show this. This was also done in previous works, but except for that we have a very strict restriction on the length. We want the path to be very short. Okay, the second step says the following. So assume that I'm a party and I have d bits to send. But I don't need to send these d bits to d different parties. I only need to speak with d over lambda different parties, where lambda is some parameter.
Again, d regular, d is the same d? Or?
It's the same d, yeah. So I have d bits to send, but only to d over lambda different parties. Then we show how to do it reliably with this amount of rounds and high probability, m square log m rounds. How do we do it? It's based on the same relay that I was talking about. So first we take these d bits, we encode them using some code, and then we use theorem 1 and send each bit using this disjoint path. So we can send at each time we can send d over m of the bits using this joint path. So how do we get this number of rounds? So first it takes m steps to go with this 2m path, right? This is 1m. And the m square comes from the fact that we can only send to d over m parties at one time. So this gives us another factor of m. The log m is technicality, and let's just skip this one. Okay? And last step, so we are not done, because what we want to do, we want to simulate one round of the noiseless protocol. In one round of the noiseless protocol, each party has one bit to send to all of his d neighbors. Right? And we cannot do this. We can only talk with d over lambda parties. So in the third theorem, we just show how to send one bit to the d neighbors by applying theorem 2 m recursive times. So we're moving bits from place to place in order to fulfill this one round. So this is a sketch, very, very high level sketch of how this scheme works. Let me end this talk with open questions. So what you can see in this talk, that there is correlation between the topology and the rate that we get of the coding. And the question is can we get a positive rate for any topology? The answer is probably not. And another question is there a difference between the random case, stochastic case, and the adversarial case that resists 1 over n noise? How things go there and how the topology affects the rate in this case. Okay, that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Questions?
So what is the bed topology?
What is the bed topology? Star. So star has degree n, so RS94 doesn't work. And it's not irregular, so our scheme doesn't work as well. And
Also, it has small mixing time.
it has small mixing time, but as we said, what we need is not the small mixing time, but a lot of paths between two parties. And star doesn't have a lot of paths between two parties. It has only one path between two parties. So this is a good counterexample.
So you seem to always assume an undirected topology, is that right?
Yes.
So what about directed?
So we didn't think about it that much. The paper by Hosa and Schulman, they also discussed the case of directed graphs. So in the adversarial case, they know what to say, how the noise and the rate is affected by the topology of directed graphs. So
And also, it seems in yours, you need to know the topology of the whole graph to simulate it, right? Is that true?
Yes.
So is there any decentralized version of this? The original protocol doesn't?
not yet.
No, but I mean, to some extent, see, T, I mean, in order for all of these things to be interesting, T is much larger than N. So you can just communicate, say, topology to begin with, and it will be something that's only of the order of n squared, like n squared log n. If T is larger
No, but then you need some interactive protocol that finds the topology if the parties don't know it. It's not trivial, but yes, this is.
Why is it?
No, you can just flag it.
There is very rich literature which should be very relevant for this on routing where the key parameter is how expanding the graph is.
Yeah.
There is a whole series of papers, Roder, Peleg, Upfal, Fries, every subset of these four and others. Deep and beautiful.
Right.
What?
Even the empty set had the paper?
Oh, sure. I think it was rejected. Really, I think it should be very relevant to what we're doing.
The other question I had is, you said T has to be much larger than N. Why is that? Is that the only interesting case? What if T is much smaller than N?
Then it's not clear, like, because like it may be that you have one error and it's like kind of propagates, like, so assume that you have one person, like, who wants to send one bit to everybody in the network. So if T is much smaller, like one error will propagate and there is no way you can fix
But
it.
that's not true in the mixing case, right? Because there you can get everything through the network very quickly.
No, I take it. I mean, if let's say it this way, if T is much larger than N, then we're fine, right?
I mean, in practice, if you're really doing something, T is probably much smaller than N, not larger.
But if T is smaller than N, then you only really need to know the topology around yourself, right?
Right, which is, you have this small mixing time. So maybe that's the case that you kind of is more interesting, right?
Anyway, let's thank Ron and Klim and all the other